I've played tons of NES games, and as you all know, these games vary in difficulty from the most casual gameplay experience to ones that will turn your pancreas into syrup. That's the way it went. The term Nintendo Hard wasn't just some forced term from a magazine or from Nintendo themselves, it was a culturally relevant term that the masses embraced. They understood that there were some hard games on the NES, and with those hard games came extremely difficult bosses at the helm, ready to invalidate our existences in our childhood, and in my case, adulthood. That's the topic of today's episode, my top 10 hardest bosses on the NES. Now it goes without saying I will be talking about final bosses, so spoiler alert, right? If you don't want to know what you're going up against, then this video isn't for you, and you might want to skip it. But if you're okay with seeing some of the meanest experiences that you will have holding that simple controller, then stick around. Let's begin. Narc was a game that I was kind of excited to check out because it's one of those games that were big in the arcade because of the topic. You were essentially a badass narc for the DEA, walking down the street shooting crack dealers, stealing their drugs, and/or arresting them. But let's be honest, you shot him, didn't you? Don't lie to me. You shot him. The game itself in the arcades, it isn't bad. Very much a coin eater, but it isn't bad. But the NES version is a sight to behold. On my stream, sometimes I whip out a mental ruler, a measurement, a scale if you will. It goes from 1 to go fuck yourself. To put that into terms that's easier to understand, 1 is a small cigarette lighter flame, and 10 is the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. In the case of Narc, it's WR102, which burns at 200,000 Kelvin! Narc is an absolute mistake on the NES, and should you happen to make it far enough to beat it, you'll encounter Mr. Big, and no, not the band. The drug dealer, a weird guy with a triple chin smoking a fat cigar, and when we encounter him, we fight his head mounted on a robotic platform. Phase 1 has him crawling around launching his tongues at you and shooting beams out of his eyes, before his skull breaks out and starts trying to bite you. Now what sucks about this fight is that Mr. Big is the poster child of the term bullet sponge. You can throw everything you want at him, it feels like nothing is going to kill him, even bombs barely do any damage, and that's assuming you were equipped for the fight to begin with, because you're doomed to fail if you don't have enough ammo. It's tedious, and it's frustrating. Honorable mention to one of my favorite NES games out there from Konami, Jackal. It's such an approachable game to me. It's one that folks of all ages can just pick up and go, and the difficulty scales fairly decently. We shoot or run over the bad guys, blow up buildings, rescue POWs, and bring those POWs to helipads. It's a 30-minute game at best, and if you just want one to veg out on, this is a great game to do it, until you get to the final boss. You remember how I said we blow up buildings? Well, the final boss of Jackal is literally a building. The bad guy's headquarters with 2 massive guns on top, and it doesn't help that enemy tanks are consistently spawning in. Well, the good news is it's pretty easy to cheese it. After all, it's just a building. Oh shit, it's a building-sized tank! Yeah, inside of this building is a massive tank, and that tank has a main cannon as well as a gunner. It's not impossible, but it does deserve to be on this list. One game I've always wanted to play but haven't had the time to check out was Batman on the NES, because to me, it's the first time in a long time where the Caped Crusader was represented in a way that made sense. The previous games were horrible usages of the franchise, and Sunsoft managed to figure it out. Now again, I haven't played this game personally, but I've seen countless peers of mine beat this game for either speedrunning or retro achievements, and every single time they make it to the Joker, they lean forward in their seat. Joker is something else. He's fast as hell, booking it across the screen, and he hits you with 2 specific different moves, at least from what I know. The first is the most obvious. It's his Smith & Wesson Model 15-3 with a fucking telescopic 21-inch barrel. And if he hits you with that, you're gonna lose 3 hit points. You only get 8 hit points, so this fight can be over as soon as it starts. He shoots 2 different projectiles, a standard bullet and a larger wave-like bomb thing. But the other thing that he can do is call down lightning, so you're constantly finding yourself in a state of dodging lightning and his bullets, and that is not an easy task. He's one of the hardest bosses of the NES era for a reason. Final Fantasy is a very important game to me because it was my exposure to the JRPG world. For a long time, if I played what would be considered a JRPG, I always thought they were just simply action-adventure games, if that makes sense. I never knew it was its own genre. At some point while being stationed in South Korea, I wanted to check out Final Fantasy because it was on the iPhone store, and I always heard about how cool the later games were, so I figured, why not? Let's check it out. And from that point on, I was hooked. To me, this is one of my favorite JRPGs, and it's fun to go back and see where the genre all but started. Now, throughout the game, we take on monsters of epic proportions. The four fiends and chaos are terrifyingly powerful, and will test your ability to balance your skills in the party configuration that you've decided to take. But there's one enemy that doesn't care if you live or die or become dust beneath his turret, and that is the infamous Warmech. Now, Warmech isn't a scripted enemy, nor is he required to be fought. He's a random encounter and one of the first super bosses in the franchise. He's located in the area that precedes the bridge leading to the intended boss fight with Tiamat, and there's a 1 in 100 chance, so 1% chance, that when you enter a battle, Warmech, or Death Machine, depending on which version you're playing, will be the enemy that you fight. And let me tell you, you don't want to mess around with Warmech. He oftentimes gets preemptive strikes, which means that he can fire off nuke as soon as the fight starts, and his physical attacks do 2 hits a pop. And just in case you need an extra reason to shit your pants, he also regenerates his health automatically, and depending on the version you play, that also differs. If you're playing the NES version, he only regenerates 3 HP a round, but if you're playing the newer versions, he recovers 5% of his max HP every round, so 100 HP. And that's a big difference. No matter what you do, treat this as a boss fight and put on your brown pants because this is a shitty time. Castlevania is a great game, absolutely amazing platformer from the likes of Konami, and it's one of my guilty pleasure games that I go back to and beat every now and again because it's fun. But just because it's fun doesn't mean it's absent of some horrifically annoying tropes. Castlevania was my introduction to Pits of Doom and knockback physics, and I learned quickly that no matter how many strong, deadly enemies that were sent my way, the stairs in Castlevania would kill me much more often, more than any enemy could dream of. Now, the bosses in Castlevania, they're all fairly difficult in their own way. Even the big bad evil guy Dracula, he's a pain in the butt. He just kind of teleports on top of you whenever he wants, and in his second form, he just leaps around as a deformed bat, trying to crush you. Nothing holy water can't deal with. But the one boss that will put a leash on you and walk you around the block is Death, or the Grim Reaper. He's a recurring enemy, one that I hate to deal with. Death manifests as the boss of Stage 15. He plops his frumpty ass on a platform to the right, then continuously manifests these highly unavoidable scythes that home in on you. You have to make a conscious decision to either hit Death or hit the scythes, of which the latter is better because if you don't, they'll continue to spawn and become unmanageable. And if that happens, you're gonna die. Now, if you're me, you just keep spamming holy water where he lands and the fight is over in 2 to 3 seconds. But again, if you're pure to playing the way that Konami intended, you're gonna have a rough time. Have you ever played Wizardry? That game is incredibly important to the history of RPGs. Between Wizardry and Ultima, they formed the genre that we know and love, and the mechanics from these games are still present in RPGs to this day. But Wizardry 1 has a really mean boss at the end, Wordna. He's an incredibly powerful wizard that can cast spells that affect your entire party at once, like Mass Fear, Sleep, or Fireball. He can steal levels from you, he can drain your magic, and you cannot run from the fight. As a sorcerer, he has insanely high defense and a metric fuckload of hit points. And what's so crazy is that he's in the heart of the final dungeon, meaning you're gonna have to hope you don't waste valuable magic on your way through the mazes. A low resource run in this is basically a death sentence. So what do? Teleport him away. Yeah, I teleported him away because the programmers left that in the game. So I beat him by technicality. Just yeeted him into the great expanse. Yes! But in the end, the game was fun to check out, and I personally didn't play it on the NES, I played it on the PS1, but the boss behaviors and the majority of the game's mechanics are exactly the same, so he gets himself an honorable mention. Castlevania 1 was hard, but it wasn't impossible. Castlevania 2 was impossible, but it wasn't hard. Then we had Castlevania 3, which was hard and in some cases almost impossible. To me, Konami pulled all of the stops out to make an epic ending to the NES era trilogy, and with that came some of the most angry, violent, and aggressive enemies you will ever encounter. You need to be on your toes fairly consistently. Now, because this game has branching paths and because it has selectable characters depending on which path you take, you're going to experience different enemies and bosses along the way. And even death makes a return. He's a little bit more assholey, but he's there. But the one boss that kicked me around like a soccer ball being kicked by a bored teenager in the garage was Dracula. Dracula in the first game, he's a pushover once you understand his patterns. Dracula in the second game, not even really Dracula, just kind of a statue thing. Dracula in Castlevania 3, he's the fucking Indomitian Sue of the Castlevania world. You'll get to him and he's just cheating, kicking you in the head. He starts by summoning twin pillars of fire, immediately followed by a much larger pillar of fire. He then teleports to God knows where and then does it all again. Then phase 2 has him as a cornucopia of sadness flying around vomiting on you. And the final phase, believe it or not, is the easiest. He's this strange statue that shoots laser beams at you and you have to get on floating blocks and whack him in the eyes. To many this won't be hard, but I challenge you to check it out. Once you understand it, you get better at it. It's a very cheap fight though. So many people complain about the dam level in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but to be honest, that level is child's play in comparison to the levels leading up to the Technodrome. It seems like Konami threw everything and anything they could your way, and if you make it to Area 5, you'll encounter the Technodrome itself. It's a big old ball of anger that has an eyeball and these arms that launch lightning at you, and guess what? Enemies will constantly stream out of the Technodrome to fist your butthole. This is a fight you kind of need to be set up for and understand the limitations of the turtle that you have. The only turtle that can hit the Technodrome reliably is Donatello, and that's due to his bow staff. His reach is incredible. But if you don't have Donnie, you have to use sub-weapons, and if you don't have those, well, tough titties, you're screwed. There's a barrier that keeps you at bay, lasers zooming past your head, and it's a chore to get through it, but once you do, the only thing that stands in your way now is Shredder himself. Mega Man was always difficult to me, but it was difficult in a way that stems from overzealous developers adding things that made it hard, right? The enemies you encounter for the most part are gone in a few hits, but they just keep coming. God forbid you move to their spawn point again, because they do not stop coming your way. Mega Man was also known for a tremendous amount of boss fights, at least for platformers at the time. We had 6 Robot Masters, and we would have to fight 4 of them again, which kind of set the foundation for future games. But the true bosses happen near the end of the game. We have a shadow clone of Mega Man, which isn't really that hard, and Dr. Wily, who really isn't that hard either. But there is one enemy that will staple your nuts to your inner thigh, and he is known as the Yellow Devil. The Yellow Devil is a giant gelatinous cucklord who is capable of rearranging his body across the screen. You can hit his eye, that's what we're going for anyway, but before you can get your shots off, he proceeds to send 19 pieces of his DNA your way in a very long, drawn-out pattern. If you're like me, you could always use the Thunder Beam and just push the pause button on and off quickly, and you can dispatch him in the cheesy way. But if you were to commit to beating him the proper way, it's going to be a test of patience. Ninja Gaiden is the bane of my existence. You'll often hear me say that Ninja Gaiden is a litmus test for everything wrong with the NES, and guess what? It is. We had horrific sprite flicker, obnoxious knockback physics, pits of despair at every turn, and enemies that never stop coming. It puts Peter North to shame. But the one enemy that always irritated the hell out of me was the Jackio, the reoccurring antagonist that can be found in Ninja Gaiden 1 and Ninja Gaiden 2, the Dark Sword of Chaos. Now, I've only encountered him in the first game because I've only ever played the first game, so we're talking about Ninja Gaiden 1. The whole boss fight with the Jackio occurs over 3 phases that never seem to end because there's always a cutscene between them. Phase 1 is the Masked Devil, which is a really fancy way of saying that Jackio has possessed your dad and put his body in a suit of armor with the sole intention of killing you. Oh, By the way, just so you know, Jackio is using an orb that launches projectiles at the masked devil to protect him, and yes, they hurt. Badly. So we have to dodge those and take out the red orb. Then we get a cutscene. Phase 2 is the Jackio and his Rita Repulsa era floating around like an asshole at the top of the screen launching fire at you. And this fire is programmed extremely well. It falls down and you think, oh, I can dodge this. Yeah, you can, until the fire decides to home in on you. And then you're like, oh shit! And then you're tilted and you die, thinking you can just do the last level again. No, fuck you, kid. Go back to 6-1. This actually happened to me in real life.
You're welcome. It's very loud. Six one.
The final phase is a joke compared to the previous one. It's basically the demon sculpture and we just wail on it. It's hard, but it's not nearly as hard as the second phase of the fight. The Legend of Zelda is one of my favorite franchises because at its core, it's always been about exploration. Some people might love Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, some might have enjoyed Twilight Princess, Wind Waker was tremendous fun, and if you're like me, Ocarina of Time sort of set a level of standards that most games moving forward would use. But long before that, we had a few games. Some were on home consoles, some were on handheld consoles, but if we go all the way back, we have The Legend of Zelda on the NES where it all began. I'm not overly fond of the top-down Zelda games, but I grew up in an era where Link was 3D, so it's tough to go back and play those. The sequel, though, that's a whole different beast. A divergence in what the franchise was, a Zelda entry with RPG elements. The ability to travel a zoomed-out overworld and go into cities to get our health restored behind closed doors. We all know what was happening. Zelda 2 was a monster to try to get through, and Death Mountain alone was 85% of the challenge that I encountered. The combat is mean and the enemies are even meaner. But the one character that will likely give you trouble, served fresh complete with a red screen, is Dark Link. As a boss, he is a one-to-one representation of you, and he mirrors every single move that you do. Where other NES-era bosses had some pattern, there was no predictable pattern because Shadow Link adapted to your attacks. His hitbox? Microscopic, and if you weren't prepared for the fight with magic or health, you're gonna have a bad time. The good thing is we can crouch in the corner and exploit the hell out of him, but if that exploit didn't exist, this would easily be number 1 on this list. It's a brutally unfair fight. I think most of you knew that this game was going to be number 1, and for many folks, myself included, we've never beaten it the right way. Mr. Dream or Mike Tyson, depending on which version you have, has always been a thorn in the side of countless folks who wanted to try to beat this game. Punch-Out itself is a wonderful game, a rhythm game where we learn the tells of all these boxers and take advantage of it. We learn that Glass Joe has a glass jaw, that when Von Kaiser ducks to uppercut us, we can crack him in the stomach and get a star, and Piston Honda, for whatever reason, wiggles his eyebrows. Muscle memory comes into play and you get sort of into a punching trance, and then when it's all said and done, we go up against the toughest opponent yet in a dream fight. For all of the other bosses I've mentioned today, it's been about learning patterns and taking advantage of those patterns, maybe even cheesing them by exploiting the programming, but in this fight, none of it matters. It's a blend of skill, reflexes, and in some ways, luck. To date, I have never managed to beat Tyson on true hardware or on emulation, and it's been argued that it is exponentially harder to hit Tyson on emulation because of the frame lag. So if you want to try to beat him, it's better to do it on true hardware, on a CRT, the way that God intended. If there was ever a piece of advice that I could give you, try not to predict Tyson's timing. You'll find yourself in a bad habit, and he's going to make you his bitch, easily. And that's it for today's episode. What did you think of this list? Are there any bosses that knocked you down a few pegs in your childhood or adulthood? Feel free to tell the community in the comment section down below. It's a great opportunity to share your experiences and maybe brag about doing something the ye old-fashioned way. Speaking of our community, if you made it to the end of this episode, you're already home in our community. We're a gathering of video game enthusiasts that love remembering when life was just a little bit easier to live. And if you align with that, you'll fit right in. Finally, the single most important thing you can do for me is to hit that thumbs up button, as it directly affects the visibility of the videos and the projects that I work on every single day. As always, from my family to your family, good energy, good vibes, Fortefyre out.